Hello everyone, UQCS are proud to host WorkingMouse tonight. WorkingMouse are a software company based out of Milton, Brisbane, and they design, develop and maintain a whole range of solutions for a range of different industries tailored to their clients' needs. We've got Geordie and Yanni today, here to talk about why software projects fail. So, on to you.
Nice one. Thanks for the intro. Alrighty, yeah, so obviously Yanni and I, we'll get into our backgrounds a little bit more. We're not developers, but we thought we'd talk to you about something a little bit different tonight, and why software projects actually may not have a 100% success rate, which I think most of us already know a little bit about, but we want to talk about the reasons why. A little bit about Yanni and myself. So I'm the head of product at WorkingMouse. I've been with the company for about 5 years now after I graduated QT. But I joined the company as a UX designer in the start, and then transitioned into a squad lead, which is the lead of our development teams. And in that process, I did my Scrum Master certificate, and I guess learn a lot more about development, which helped me as a designer as well, getting to know a bit about like what are the problems that you guys face, and how do we actually work together to solve something great. And now I've transitioned into head of product, so I predominantly work with all of our product designers and mentoring them through the process of scoping projects for our clients. We have developers join us in our team as well to spec out the projects that we build. So I could give Yanni an introduction, but you could also do it. I couldn't.
Cool, so I'll start off by saying I went to the right university, Griffith. No, I did my undergrad here. It was in law and marketing, and actually started working for WorkingMouse while I was studying here. So that was in a junior marketing role, and once I graduated, moved into account management, which gave me a bit more of an understanding as to what goes on in the projects, why things go well when they do, and what goes wrong when they don't necessarily go as well as you expect. So yeah, did that for a few years, and about a year ago transitioned into the head of marketing role. So you guys know software is pretty complicated, and for a lot of our clients there's a really big upskilling or learning process right at the start. So a lot of my job at the moment is focused around, well, how can we give them the right information so that they understand what we're doing, and they can participate in productive conversations to actually get their project where it needs to go.
Totally. Yeah, and as you can see, we don't tend to take ourselves too seriously, and we like to have a bit of fun in our workplace. So what is WorkingMouse then? As our fantastic MC told, we were a software design and development company. We're working in Milton. And we work with clients who are in services to transform their businesses. And we primarily build web and mobile applications. We do a little bit of marketing, or static marketing sites as well, but we work across a huge range of industries, and we've done government projects, large enterprises, and a bunch of startups as well. So we've seen it all, and that's my favorite part about the job too, I think, is that no days are the same and no projects are the same either. You might be on a project for 5 to 15, 20 weeks, but then the next one will be hugely diverse, and the rest of your year is unpredictable, which is kind of cool. A few quick facts about our company. We were founded by Evan back in 2013, so he actually did his PhD here at UQ, and he started the first version of WorkingMouse out of iLabs. I think, is that still here? Yes? I assume that's still in existence?
What, Ventures now?
Oh, Ventures, okay. So yeah, that's where we started, and then moved on to up to Hawken Drive. I think our office is now...
It's a gaming cafe or internet cafe?
Above the subway on Hawken Drive. Don't know if you know those shops. We definitely overcrowded it, as you can see. We outgrew it when we hit probably 30 something. But we were there for 6 years. It was a good time. That was bulk startup mode. And then we've moved into Milton, which is a much bigger office, and we've now expanded to about 59 employees, with 70 in the total company group. We've got Dod Bots along with us as well. So we're on top of the railway station there, and yeah, you can tell we're a bit more mature now.
You can tell our photography's improved.
Exactly, photography improved. But yeah, during COVID too, we had to go work from home, but now we've kind of transitioned back and we've got a bit of a hybrid workforce. So half are working from home, like occasionally, and some in the office, and some fully at home as well. Unless we've got client projects where you really need to be, client meetings, and you need to be in the office for it. It's kind of a choose your own adventure at this point, which is nice to have that flexibility. And as I said, yeah, we've got our company group, which is East Cottage Industries, and it includes Dod Bots as well. So WorkingMouse is the services business. We work with clients to build their custom projects, and Dod Bots is the technology we use to build it. So it helps us get our projects modeled and I guess rapidly developed initially. It's a great starting point with all of the out-of-the-box kind of security and user setup. And then we kind of put on our custom parts of the project. They go in as protected regions. And that's how we work with this technology to build faster. And we love a good murder mystery party, which is AKA dress-up party. Someone is the murderer, we have to find out who that is. Someone dies during the night, there's a lot of adventure. We just had our most recent one, actually. It was, 1950s Hollywood? That was pretty good. Our CEO's in here somewhere, he's the Chewbacca. I don't know if you can, that's Maddie, yeah. So yeah, we love to have a good time. All right, so back to the topic at hand. Software isn't easy. You guys would already know that it's quite complex, but the rest of the world doesn't know that really, or the full depths of it. And I can't count the amount of times I've been in an Uber, had the old "what do you do" conversation, and when they find out you're in software, all of a sudden they've got this wicked idea for an app. You're just like, righto, here we go, lay it on me. And next thing they've explained it, and they're just like, it shouldn't be too hard, right? I was like, oh, it's an Uber for chickens, but it tracks your location, and then if it triggers a nuclear airstrike when you drive near a fox. I'm just sitting there like, yeah, this is a great idea. You let them down hard though, don't you?
Yeah, I just tell them how much it costs, and they generally say, whoa, that's it.
I'm out. Suddenly that idea is not so great. But the point is, yeah, there's so much more to software than just a great idea. And in our 9 years of existence, WorkingMouse has witnessed so many different clients, different sizes, different types, and we've seen them achieve all different levels of success as well. And very rarely is a great idea or a wild wow idea the reason why a project succeeds. So Yanni is going to go through why they may not.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Jody. So when we were, I guess, discussing what we were going to talk about, and we thought, okay, well, let's explain a bit more about why projects go south. So hopefully these guys can work out what to avoid. Thought there's a lot of reasons. We'll probably just distill it to the top 5. Yeah. So number 1 is there's no goal or problem statement. So generally the first meeting you rock up and they say, okay, I know what I want. It has to do X, Y, Z. And over a few years, we've learned the hot tip that no one knows what they want. People think they know what they want, and then generally it'll change about 2 to 3 times over the course of a week. So yeah, no one really knows what they want. What you end up finding is when you focus on that feature level or that functionality level, they'll change more rapidly than if you take that step back and say, okay, well, rather than focusing on every single thing that it's going to do, why don't we abstract that into a problem statement? Or why don't we set some goals for what we want to achieve? By doing that, you generally won't find there's as much change. They'll have a single core idea there and you can stick to that, and it's the execution or the delivery that'll change. And that's fine because you've always got something to reference back to. But yeah, rushing through it just leads to a misaligned team and disjointed product. So going back to Geordie's earlier example, how do we know the chickens even want a nuclear airstrike? They might just want a heads up. There's a fox around the corner. But by setting the functionality or setting the solution at an early stage, there's no way you'd be able to find that out, even if you've got a chicken whisperer on your team. So the main culprits, you might know these two. One on the left's in a bit of hot water. But yeah, the way government agencies tend to work is they'll get together in a room and they'll invite different stakeholders. None of them may have ever been in a software project before, and they'll say, all right, let's create our shopping list. This is everything we want the application to do, and it's going to solve all of our problems. And then they'll put that out in a really big document called a request for tender, and they'll give it to the working mouses of the world, and they'll say, what can you do for us? How much is it going to cost? How are you going to do it? And you'll have to go through every requirement and say, all right, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to do that. It's a very time-consuming process, but it also means you jump straight into solution mode, delivery mode. And where does that get us? A couple of quick examples. They tried to roll out a national biometric database. The ACIC did. Cost them 26 million. They said it's going to cost another 50 million to get this thing done. Let's just dump it here. So it doesn't get used. They've just pulled the pin. The Queensland Health Hospitals digitisation project that's been running for a few years is $260 million over budget. I think in total it was in the billions that it ended up spending, which makes us all feel good as taxpayers. You might think, okay, well, these are just two isolated incidents. A lot of projects go over budget or over time. They had to do a bit more of an analysis of it over COVID because they wanted to work out, all right, well, this is where we're at with all our projects. What's it going to take to get them over the line? About half of them or over half of them have either gone over budget or over time. So seems to be repeat offenders. Number two, going too big too soon. Airbnb wasn't made in a day. A lot of people will have their final polished vision and they'll say, cool, let's try and cram it into a 3-month MVP. And it means you're just loading it with features, you're not testing, you're rushing through it, and at the end of the day, you kind of get a stinking pile of poo. So a lot of the time it means that you fail to focus on a niche or a segment of core loyal users, and that's something Airbnb did pretty well in the early days, and so did Uber and a lot of successful applications. Is they started in their niche, they gained their loyal user base, and then they rolled it out in a more expansive fashion. One application up there, I don't know if you guys have heard of Quibi, but it's kind of like TikTok or YouTube. They raised a ton of money, like 1.75 billion, and they ended up giving everyone a 3-month trial, had about 1 million users, finished the 3-month trial, and had about 70,000 users. Generally, people were leaving for YouTube and TikTok. It's cheaper, you have to pay for it. But they spent about $1.7 billion to figure that out. Whereas I bet you could probably figure it out a bit cheaper.
And I think dev teams can kind of fall into this trap with clients and allowing them to go too big too soon. That's a lot of what we try and do, is enable our teams to keep projects small as well. Because as the developer on a project, you can keep saying, I can build this, but we actually encourage you to help the customer find the MVP and kind of protect that, because we know what the risks are.
This is something I saw a lot in account management, was poor expectation management, and it's probably the biggest reason projects fail, the most frequent reason. Expectation management is everything. There's one piece of advice I can give you guys to leave today. It'd be work on your communication skills, because our best developers are also our best communicators. it helps when you're relaying back information as to why something is going to be so complex, or whether there is an easier way to do the same thing, to have that rapport with the client and to be able to clearly communicate what you want to do and how you're going to do it. It's so big. So giving you an actual story, one of our early clients was building a very complex asset management system. Their expectation was that all of our time would be spent on feature development. They didn't expect that time would be spent on internal meetings, releasing, iteration, review and planning meetings. They pretty much just thought, cool, Yanni's going to get in at 9 a.m, he's going to punch code until 5 p.m, and then he's going to go home, which isn't the case. We let our developers eat as well. It's pretty important. But when they started questioning, okay, well, where's the time going? You dig a bit deeper and you find that there are different areas that it flows into. And it impacts the trust between developers and clients. They didn't know that at the start, and they might have accepted it, but their expectations weren't managed properly. They thought all of our time would be on that, and you get into a bit of a push and pull sort of situation. So yeah, since then, we've been more transparent about, this is the allocation you get on feature development, this is what we need for releasing, this is what we need for testing. But just outlining that is huge. Probably not something you guys are going to see much in your uni projects, but definitely a big thing in the real world is the dedicated product owner situation. Two main big no-nos: too many cooks in the kitchen. So it's where about 4 or 5 people are the decision makers, and you have to try and get a decision out of them. And you sit in a meeting for 2 hours to come out of it with one decision, maybe. So everyone's got different agendas. You don't know who to go to. The other one is where the CEO comes to you and they're going to be the mastermind behind the project, and they're going to be the product owner as well. They've got a business to run. They're pretty busy. They don't answer your calls when you need. So you're flat out getting a decision out of them as well.
I had an example recently. It was pretty wild. I rocked up to the client's office for a scope meeting. So my team was with me. Go in. She goes, "Oh, you just get started on the meeting. I've got another meeting kicking off right now." So we had a meeting with ourselves for 40 minutes. Then she arrived and just checked her Facebook. So soon, not long after, coincidentally, the company hired a product owner dedicated to take her position, thankfully. But that kind of stuff just makes it so hard for our teams to work with. You don't have anyone there listening to you, or likewise if there's too many people shouting opinions at you. So a dedicated product owner is super important.
Definitely. We thought, well, how are people going to listen to us? Let's try and quantify it. So we went back through our last few projects and we said, all right, well, which projects had dedicated product owners, which didn't? What were the change requests from those projects that didn't versus those that did? And how can we quantify that? So over a 10-week project, just a single milestone, not a big build, it was about $40,000 worth of changes. So it's become a much easier conversation now to say, look, you should probably hire a product owner. It's going to save you 40 grand.
Costing you this much, yeah.
The last one is poor planning. So it's pretty broad. I've got a few issues in there. First one is no user interviews or testing. Best metaphor I can give here is going to Macca's and they just look at you up and down and say, you're probably going to want a 24-pack of nuggets. And they might be right, I probably do, but it would have been nice to have been asked first. So yeah, and most of the time they're going to be wrong, and the easiest way to work it out, or for you to work out what your users want, is to ask them. Issue number 2, no prototypes or mock-ups. Jumping straight into the code generally means that our product owners or our clients will have one perception of how it's going to look and feel, and we might have a completely different understanding, but until you see it on a screen, there's just no alignment. Number 3, no backlog or implementation strategy. Without a backlog, we don't know exactly what we're building. Without an implementation implementation strategy, we don't know how we're building it, which is just going to take a lot longer when you're actually in development mode. Number 4, inaccurate estimations. The example I gave you before, it's funny how fast things can go south when you're over time. And as accurate as you can be up front in having the research and the information you need to make an accurate estimation means you don't have to deal with that at the back end of the project. And number 5 is no domain knowledge. So getting in and actually understanding the industry, for us it's pretty difficult because there are different industries that we work amongst. Geordie mentioned it before, one day you're doing something, the next day you're on a completely different industry and project. So jumping around like that means you probably need a few days just to sort of understand what the client's going through.
Yeah, I'm thinking one developer in particular is now an expert in concrete precast engineering calculations, but also at the same time grain storage registration numbers. So it's just so different, and you end up having all this really obscure knowledge about different industries, which is kind of cool. Cool, so what do our developers say? I took a lesson out of our own book and I spoke to my users, so hopefully preparing for a talk that might be somewhat interesting to you guys. And I talked to a few guys who are not, well, they're either still at uni or fresh out. And I asked, what do you wish you knew at uni? What has working at WorkingMouse or in the industry taught you that you wish you knew back then, or you could have used that knowledge? So top things were like how to estimate, or best said, not underestimate the things that you're taking on or the amount of work that you're doing or committing to a project. How to break down requirements then into chunks that you can solve, and how to deal with team members that you don't really have any control over as well. So that was nice, good little learnings there. My favourite quote was, if I had my time over at uni again, I would just jump in and start writing spaghetti code, which I'm so proud of seeing that, because it's not the right approach that we ever want to take on here. It's the planning at the start and breaking things down into manageable pieces is really key. So what can you guys do to de-risk your uni projects or your side hustles, whatever you've got going on, or even just a project that you're working on for yourself? Start with a problem. That's my biggest thing, especially as a designer. But what problem are you solving? And you should be able to summarize it into a single sentence. If it's got all these other bells and whistles, you can most probably cut that out and get to the core of what you're solving. Once you have the core, then if you can stay focused on that for an entire project, or you're building something for someone and it really just solves that single problem, it's going to turn out much better than if you did all the extra cool stuff, like the weather app or whatever. It doesn't matter, the problem does. All right, and what we do at WorkingMouse is when clients first come to us for a brief meeting, it's like it's not even a quote, but it's the first time to meet them. And we have this meeting for free to see if we can try and find a fit there. We go through this Lean UX canvas with them. So there's all different areas on it, but you fill in your business problem, potential solutions, business outcomes, who are the users, and a hypothesis. You don't have to go through all of that. If you want to know more, come and talk to me or scan the QR code. We've got like a little workshop on that. But if you just do these few next slides, that will already be a big help. So start by listing, get some sticky notes, whiteboard, whatever. Start by listing out the problems. So back to our example, people in dense suburban areas can't keep roosters. Hens can't organise their own transport. No way for single hens to meet kind, loving roosters. So list them all out, and some of them are going to scream out bigger than the others. And then work out what your key business and user outcomes. And that sounds overwhelming, but really, if you just put a couple of points up there that says, okay, at the end of this build, MVP, whatever, this next chunk, I want the business, or the business outcome has to be 20 chooks onboarded onto the beta platform, And for the users, this is also so important to consider both sides, because it's got to make money, but you've got to build a tool that's relevant to some users, otherwise they're not going to pay for it. So for our users, non-chicken owners can maybe rent a chook for the day, or spend time with a chicken if they can travel. And our users, so hen owners, can then breed chickens without owning a rooster. And then take those two things and kind of distill it into one sentence. And obviously this problem is just ridiculous, so I actually struggled to form a problem statement. But I tried to make it simple. Build a tool that allows verified chicken owners to rent out their chooks. So, if they're verified, it's kind of like finding those keywords. And if they're verified, they're obviously not going to be foxes, whatever. But it's just putting brackets on a problem, so that when you move into planning, now you're going to go brainstorm a few things, you can always look back at this and know if your solution meets that. You're like, okay, I set out what I wanted to achieve. This is still, ready to move into development. We haven't been distracted. So if you can do those three things, your projects will be much better off for it. Getting to know your users is the next one. And it's almost never everyone. Don't ever assume everyone's going to use your app. Facebook didn't start out that way, neither did Instagram. You've got to define your first customer and make them fall in love with it. I know you guys, there's a really good video that the founder of Twitch actually filmed. He consults now. He's really switched on. But basically, Twitch started out as something called Justin TV, and they just put a guy in a room and filmed him all day and streamed that on the internet. And some group of people loved it, and so they just kept talking to them and making this thing whatever they wanted. And then we've got Twitch today, which is obviously hugely successful and has way more users. But it's a cool story if you want to look him up. But yeah, to get to know your users, it does sound daunting, and it takes a little bit of your time, but ultimately you could just send out a survey, so ask 3 to 5 questions, and then you can look for trends in that data. So you can use Typeform, SurveyMonkey, Menti, but just make sure that they are within your user group. You don't want to just get anyone to fill it in, because that's going to lead you in the wrong direction. And discovery interviews. When we're in scope, we also get our developers to come along to discovery interviews, because when you're 10 weeks into a project, having that knowledge of actually meeting a user in the very first place, in the first few weeks, is really helpful, because you're always going to solve random problems while you're in development. And if you can think back to that person you met that had this problem, you're like, yes, I'll do it this way. Betsy will be happy with this solution. It does help you quite a lot. But you only need 10 to 15 minutes talking to someone, 3 to 5 people, and then you'll notice trends. That's all the sample size you need when you're working on smaller projects, of course. But until you validate your problem with them, you're only guessing. If you talk to these people and all of a sudden they don't have the problem you set out to solve, then it's probably a good indication that we should kill it now. But yeah, some really good tools. You look them up, or come talk to me if you want to know a bit more about this. Define your requirements early. This is the key point from the 3 guys I spoke to above. I guess they definitely were guilty of just jumping into uni projects and wanting to just start working on it and get into the code. But now they've realized that just taking a bit of time to define them beforehand makes them far more equipped to develop quality software in the end, and an overall solution that's not just a nightmare. But before we do any development work, we get all of our requirements laid out and outlined in a backlog, and they meet our definition of ready, we call it. And what it is that all occurs in our scoping process. So client comes from brief, they meet with us, they get a scoping team, we spend 2 to 4 weeks with them planning, and so that's the scoping team is a designer and a developer together working, and and that's kind of cool in itself. Is as a developer in our company, you can be in control of the solution that the clients end up going with and building. then it moves into development. So those two phases are really tightly coupled and gets out to support, or it may go around again and we build multiple milestones for that particular client. And a part of that, I guess the developers, while the designers are sketching, mocking up and prototyping, the devs are de-risking and tech spiking the trickier requirements. So let's say, you know, your project's got drag and drop in it and you haven't done that before, or you want to play around with it, or I had one recently where we were trying to get balls to move on a screen, so the developer kind of played with that sort of thing. So it's a fun time for them. But questions to ask, and I mean, these are more for like integration. So does it require third-party integration? Are there costs involved? Does anyone here have the skill set to actually be able to use this thing? And then things to look for. I mean, that's the kind of research that you do, but and then just distill it in a document in the end, or it helps you form the requirements at the end of scope. So that involves writing a backlog and all sorts of fun stuff. Fourth is defining a single product owner, and again, I tried to relate this to you at uni. So do you have a lot of group projects, or are you doing projects? Yeah, so you've probably got a project lead, I think, or not really. So that's probably a problem in itself, because it's the too many cooks in the kitchen. It's like, who out of us, and it doesn't have to be who out of us is in control or is the boss. It's just who's the advocate for the project, like who's thinking of that first problem statement and making sure whatever we do meets that. It's really important to have that product owner / project lead just having that focus, because even if you don't agree with the project lead, which probably at uni you may not always do that, but if you all just go along and execute a vision together, you're going to achieve something better or deliver more value than if you all go off in different directions. And fifth is know what value you bring to the team. So as I said, we have the two phases, so scoping and development. These notes are wrong, don't look at them, but look at me. Scoping is all about talking to clients and finding solutions to the problem statement that you've been given. So you're tech spiking, you're doing all that sort of stuff. You're coming up with the architecture of the platform and thinking about the security. And then when you're in development, if you're the kind of person that prefers being delivered a solution and you just want to go hammer on that and testing and that sort of stuff, then that's for you. We do a mix, so our developers kind of might do 6 months of development and then do a quick 4-week scoping project and jump back into development again. But being the head of the scoping team, I love to see developers who recognize that they love to talk to clients, because we get really nice, working partnerships out of that. All right, round it up. Yanni's hot tip.
That's, great lead into hot tip. Communication skills. If you can explain to a client why something's going to take 2 weeks to build, or how it can be simplified, it just streamlines a project. They might not necessarily need it to be done a particular way if you gave them an alternative that's just as good and twice as fast. So if you can explain that and articulate it clearly, projects are going to go a lot smoother.
Yeah, same with working with designers. I don't know if you guys do group projects with different disciplines and have worked with designers before, but it's like that communication is so important to be able to find the best solution. I might design something and you're like, no, that's way too hard. I'm like, cool, give me another solution. What else can we do? A workaround. That'll make you a really great team player. My hot tip is starting with a problem or a goal. Just define something and stick to that. If it has to change throughout a project, like I said, you talk to users and they're like, and you're finding that they just don't even have this problem at all, it's a pretty good indication you don't need to build this thing. But focus on the pain points that they are having. They'll whinge about something, definitely, and if you can find a trend in that, focus on that. So focus on the problem.
Cool. That kind of wraps up the content. So we're hiring support developers always. talk to Aisha.
Yeah.
Tend to hire around the end of your uni degree. Processes normally apply, shortlist. There's sort of like a really intense Hunger Games situation, and then obviously the winner is hired and the loser's it's unlucky. But yeah, talk to Aisha after this if you want to gig.
Support developers, so they touch pretty much all of our projects as they hand it over from active development. Awesome. Any questions?
Just about the hiring, do you do internships or casual positions or full-time roles? What are you looking for at the moment?
We do look for casual positions all year round, so it doesn't have to be that. At least you should be in your third year or second year, and then we always look for casual devs. And eventually, once you have graduated, you have the opportunity to work with us in a full-time capacity as a software dev.
Yeah.
For those playing at home, yes. But there are requirements.
Yes.
Email us.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Questions? Some examples up there. You're struggling.
Answer is no. Yanni doesn't have the best smile. He wanted that answer, but cool.
We do have a question from Chad, which is how do you rate tools like Jira or Confluence for organizing workflows in software teams?
So we use both of those tools. How do I rate them? Is a different conversation. No. Jira is really good for development. Confluence came out with a release recently that slowed us down a little bit in the scoping process and actually writing our backlogs. So we're investigating what else we can do there, but essentially the quickest we can get projects into Jira, the team seem to have a pretty good work. We've got all custom workflows for the different types of projects we work with. So yeah, that is our tool of choice at the moment. Thanks, Chad. Anyone else? Cool.
Another question. We were talking earlier about the different industries you worked with. Can you give an example of like the two most different things you've had to do?
What's your favourite?
Well,
This is a
different.
funny story. Well, I did a scope. We didn't go into development. We did a scope for Brisbane, a Brisbane plastic surgery company. So it was all about breast reconstruction or breast augmentation and enhancing the experience of that journey. So we scoped that, and my poor developer had to have some pretty, interesting images on his screen, and he got reported by a few people. They're like, he's looking at breasts at work, but it was for work. So that was an interesting one.
I guess contrast that with we do a lot of work for the Department of Defence and their non-procurement asset register, and touches a lot of the capability and sustainment groups. So really heavy procurement, sort of DoD level stuff there versus plastic surgery.
There's been a few other wild ones in between, but I think they're the two biggest difference. DoD have been some of are our longest clients. Yeah, they've got their own bot. We talked about cobots, and the bots are in all different languages, but DoD have their own Dod Bot. So they're just boss level, I guess.
Can you talk about cobots? What is cobots? Like, is it, I just
Take it away,
Oh,
Yanni.
jeez. Wish we had a dev here for you.
Yeah, I know.
Cobots is based on model-driven engineering. So create your schema and your entity model, and then based on that, the bots will generate a lot of the. I can use that word. Just something on the cobots marketing side of things. Used to generate work, but they'll generate the scaffold of your application. And you can use a bunch of behaviors which are like repeatable patterns. So everyone needs to log in, everyone needs user groups and permissions. So by creating that as something in an abstract level, we can apply it to every project without actually having to go in and code it every time. So they do it through an interface that's sort of drag and droppy. but yeah, you can set up your user permissions, and there's a bunch of other stuff around like CRUD. Everything's generally going to need to create, read, update, delete functionality. So being able to do that,
Yep.
date pickers, etc.
Yep.
Yeah, the best way I can describe it is sort of gives you a really good starting point, and then from that, the developers can customize it and sort of make it fit to the business logic.
Probably the most common behavior we, aside from users and permissions, of course, is forms behavior. So we talk about like all the different industries we work in and across, and the projects are very different, but at the heart of it, they probably almost always use forms. And so users either just fill in forms, or the project requires the like site admins to create their own forms. So with our forms builder allows them to do that, which obviously a lot of work goes into that kind of thing. We've got all different form types and that sort of stuff. The CodeBots behaviors allow us to pop that in. I mean, as a non-developer, I'm going to call that popping in. It's that simple. But then we can customize them so they still look like our clients, part of our client's project. We style them, and we can change the functionality within the protected regions that it's got throughout the code.
Probably my favorite part of that particular behavior is that it's runtime configurable rather than build time. So you don't actually have to go out and do a release every time to get a new form out the door, which is pretty important for a lot of our clients that are creating 50, 100 forms potentially.
And you can, if you go to codebots.com, you can sign up. It's licenses are available to the public, not just us. Yeah. Cool.
So you mentioned earlier about a simple project where a developer had to learn about precast concrete. What was that project?
Yeah.
What did that involve?
So,
What you building?
how deep do you want to go? Yeah, that's like, we were both on that project.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. But essentially, precast columns have obviously got all the metal inside of them. This company has special couplers that are at the end of each panel. That means, you know, when a crane brings in a precast panel, that it has to have propping put on it until the next layer, like the floor over the top, is poured on, and then you can take that propping down. Whereas this technology meant that the crane can come in, and the couplers on the bottom, when it goes down to the floor below it, you just need to tighten up the couplers,
Yeah.
and it's freestanding on its own. So these guys are actually
Who's the company for that?
Aptus.
If you drive past Queen's Wharf,
They're doing
have a look. They're doing a few of the towers at Queen's
Yeah.
Wharf.
Yeah.
But essentially, we had to create an application. They had a piece of Python script that would give you specifications based on how tall your building is, how many elements you needed. It would give you specifications on what Aptus parts you needed. So we created a front end over the top of that to make it a lot easier for people to put in their dimensions, run it through the Python script, and it would come out with essentially a big elements table that would tell you how you're building your structure.
Yeah. Their precast company is called Novus as well. They're kind of like us, where it has the services arm and then the technology. So Aptus is the technology and Novus is the precast company.
But it was, I guess, weird, but also awesome to see how quickly someone with a development background actually picked up like heavy engineering concepts. And I guess it's kind of coupled together. You can sort of see the relationship there, but
That was Joe. He
he by the end of it just nerded out with the engineer the whole time. And,
there's a point like at the start of the scope. Obviously, my work as a designer, I've got to understand the problem and what we're solving and start brainstorming. And then we got into like the engineering and the code behind it. I'm like, whoop, I'm backing out here. And then Joe just got it. And I was like, yes, thank God, we've got this. And yeah, it turned out to be a great project. So,
Cool.
Okay.
thank you guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks WorkingMouse for that great talk. It really feels like you know everything from engineering to plastic surgery and everything in between. Just as a small token of our appreciation, we'd like to give you these mugs each.
Thank you.
For you, Yanni. Thank you. And one for you,
Love a good
Geordie.
mug. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for coming.
Cheers.
And apply to WorkingMouse, everyone. As Day said, hiring casuals year round. Yep.
Sounds good. Thank you.